Hey y'all, welcome to the Team LocoFit Roundtable, hosted by me, Laurin Conlon, owner of Team LocoFit. Each week, I am joined by one of our coaches to dive headfirst into the nutrition, training, mindset, and coaching strategies we use with our clients. If you loved the show, please subscribe, leave us a review, tell a friend, you know the drill. And for more information about coaching, the programs we offer, and additional content, visit teamlocofit.com. All right, and we are back, and I'm joined once again by Rick, our mental health therapist.
Hi.
And today's episode is going to be one of our questions that we have sent in, and this is something that comes up all the time. This person asked a specific question, but honestly, you could sub probably almost anybody listening with any kind of intricacies here. Like, the details can be worked out, but this exact situation is so common with people. Even this literal exact situation is really common. So, I feel great when I work out, eat right consistently. Rewind. I feel great when I work out and eat right consistently, but every day I find myself making plans to do these things and don't follow through. I tell myself I will let my husband pick up my daughter from daycare and I'll take 1 hour to work out, but I feel so guilty. I should be spending time with my family, I should be preparing dinner, etc., etc. So I just go home instead. The same thing goes for my parents and at work. I put everyone else's needs first. I feel like since I became a mom, I lost who I am, and I only know who I am in relation to everyone else. How can I make myself a priority without feeling like I'm failing my family? So this is certainly, like I said, a really, really common situation that we deal with. We obviously work with a lot of moms, but even if it's not just a child, like just in general, making yourself a priority without just completely neglecting everything else in your life can be a really hard balance to strike.
Yeah, and this is, as you said, it's a fairly common issue, but it doesn't mean it's a simple solution. But if you listen to our last podcast, it also doesn't mean that it has to be an overly complicated solution either. But what I would say is, I hope, and it sounds like this particular individual has a loving, supportive family, or at least a complete family around her. She's working, she has a husband, she has obviously children in her life, new kids. And so to me, when I'm reading this, some of the first things I'm picking up is she seems kind of stressed. She seems overwhelmed. And she seems like she's carrying around a lot of guilt and shame over what she perceives to be her responsibilities.
We're really struggling right now.
What she perceives her responsibilities to be versus who she is and how she's behaving. And I think, again, this kind of lends itself to when our behaviors don't necessarily match what our expectations or beliefs are about ourselves. We begin to kind of experience this emotional turmoil in this space. And so one of the first things I guess I would want to say to this particular person, this woman, is like, what you're going through right now is really normal. So give yourself a break. You have taken on a lot. Like, you clearly care about your physical health, which is important to you. You have a family, you have a career, you have a husband. Like, these are all major things that you're learning how to juggle for the first time, and that you're trying to figure out how to put this puzzle together. And it's a jigsaw puzzle. It's a jigsaw puzzle that actually moves and fights back against you once in a while. So you can hit a stride with something and then figure out, hey, I have to rearrange this later, and often keep going through this process. So the first thing I would just try and do is just acknowledge the difficulty of this situation and how tough it really is. It's tough for people who just have themselves to manage, let alone other aspects, other people, other needs, other wants. And so my heart kind of goes out to her, because I know how difficult this is, especially for new mothers and for new fathers. It's a growing process. One of the things I'm also hearing her kind of struggle with is this loss of identity. She doesn't really know who she is anymore. And this is very common for people who have children, men and women. I think it's more prevalent in women at this point than it is in men, but it certainly is a very common theme. And so where I think some of the struggle comes from is, you knew exactly who you were, and you grew into the person that you were when you met your husband and when you made the decision to start that family. And now these new entities have come into your life and you don't know who you are. We don't oftentimes understand the full impact that having a child will have in your life and on you, in the way that it reshapes and redefines who you are. And the defining process of who we are and identifying who we are and creating that identity can be challenging for people. Especially doing it later in life when they really liked who they were and now they're feeling completely insecure. There's no confidence. Their bodies have changed. Their roles have changed. And who they are in the world has changed. And so they don't know. And so it's really confusing. And I don't know what to do sometimes. And I just keep trying to be everything to everyone. And as I'm listening to this, that's the overwhelmed part that I feel for her is I'm like, God, what time does she have for herself? I don't know. And so I would assume that that's something that you also see a lot with coaches, is that kind of like the identity crisis that starts to develop within people.
And that can, going back to the other podcast, another plug for the last podcast, but being able to make those decisions for yourself and not just saying, okay, I need to become this whole new person, or I need to just, I can't do anything that my past self used to do. And I think it's kind of relearning what you can do. So in this example of being a mom, being busy, working, having a family, feeling like you putting everybody above yourself, it's about, okay, not to say, I wish I had 3 hours a day to go to the gym. That's never going to happen. It's just not. So instead of saying, I'm not going to go at all, say, okay, how can I go 3 times a week for 30 minutes? And it's about breaking it down in these really manageable chunks and these really manageable goals that you can actually hit. And and it started off with that, I feel better and I feel great when I do this. So I think it's really important to go back to, okay, if I don't do something for myself, not at the expense of everybody else, but if I don't do anything for myself, I'm going to feel worse. My health is going to be worse. And then what's going to happen? Then I'm really not going to be able to take care of people, and everything's going to feel very, very burdensome. So I think it's about recalibrating, especially if and I don't know the situation beforehand, but if you were somebody who did a lot beforehand, right? Like, so say you were training all the time, or you were traveling or doing whatever, and now you're this whole different person, you might not be able to do that. You might be able to go on 2 trips a year, not a month. You might be able to go to the gym 3 times a week. That's it. You have to be able to recalibrate kind of where you're at and not just say, okay, I'm not going to do anything at all, because that's the worst thing that you can do. And that's what ends up happening when you feel overwhelmed. We often just do nothing. We just kind of shut down, and that's kind of what it sounds like here. Or like somebody, like you said, will get on a roll, and then like one little thing kind of kick them off, and then they just go backwards. So we really want to avoid that, and that's what we really try to do with coaching. Okay, what can we actually do with this like manageable chunk of time that you do have? Right. How can we rearrange it, and then we'll move forward.
Yeah. And that comes to the part where when you're creating a new identity for yourself, if you were a person who was in the gym twice a day, every day, or even once a day, every single day, redefining that as like, I'm still a gym person, but maybe I have to break it up into these more manageable expectations because you have filled your calendar with more. I think also one of the things that you hear a lot as a new parent is one of the most common popular phrases that people will tell you is, when you made the decision to become a parent, your life isn't about you anymore, it's about other people. And so it subconsciously starts to put this like, my needs no longer matter and everybody else's needs become more important to me. And that's not always the case. It's a balance, like anything else. You as an individual, as a mother, are still important. You are so important to the benefit and the function of that family within all of those relationships, to your husband, to your kids, to the people that you work with, everyone. So not taking care of you has a detrimental impact on all of it. It has a ripple effect that we can't truly understand unless we start to see it play out firsthand. But what it does is it kind of, your mindset shifts. It's like, okay, well now I'm a parent, so I'm not supposed to be selfish anymore. My needs, my wants, my values, my priorities aren't supposed to matter. I'm supposed to give everything to my child. And if you dreamt of being a mother and this is like your baby and you really want to be there for all these things and everything, there's this part of you that maybe is struggling with that component of learning how to reel that back and to say like, look, I actually still do matter, my priorities matter, and challenging those traditional roles. Like some of the things I was hearing in this was I would say, all right, if we're looking at some of the role conflict, what's the problem with dad making dinner? What's the problem with dad picking them up once in a while? If dad picks them up on Tuesday, Wednesdays, or Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays, and you pick her up on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, Tuesdays and Thursdays, you get what I'm going from. It all makes sense. Like, it doesn't have to be something. And some of the other stuff, just even some of the verbiage that she used, right? Like, we've talked about irrational beliefs before on the podcast. Like, I should be spending more time with my baby. I should be preparing dinner for my whole family. Well, when we start hearing the words should, we know that we're speaking from an irrational component, right? What she's talking about is her idea of what a perfect mother is. Perfect. There's that crazy word again. Versus the realities is you can't be everything to everyone. And so I would ask you, what are some of the issues that you have in relinquishing some of that to your husband? Doesn't your husband want to be a part of the life? Doesn't your husband want to cook dinner once in a while? Well, if he does, let him. Where's the issue?
He might be wanting to, and you're just shutting him down like, no, I can do this.
Right.
And then he's like, oh, well, okay, I guess I don't need to if you want to do it. But then internally, you're actually really struggling, and nobody knows.
Mm-hmm. I still think and feel that even in today's society, as woke as we are,
okay, now it's your turn to get out.
that by and large, people still feel the majority of the responsibility is going to fall on the mother to raise the kids instead of the father. And fathers, we kind of get this ability to be present without having to do too much. And what you'll see is the dads that really want to be involved, they get involved and they make themselves involved. But more times than not, it's kind of like the preconceived idea that, well, when we had the baby, that really meant mom was going to do most of taking care of that. And I don't think that that's necessarily the best situation for the children or for them, because some of the things that I would start to ask is, what benefit does your child get from you not being a happier, healthier person? And if you want to start talking about longer term benefits, well, let's look at long-term benefits of your child growing up and knowing that mommy has values and mommy has priorities, and respecting the fact that mommy has goals and things that she wants to do is just as important as any other aspect of life, of parenting. I want to teach my kids, my son, I want him to realize that, like, yeah, there's certain times I'm not going to go talk to dad. There's certain times that I'm not going to bother him when he's doing something. Like, he's doing it. That doesn't mean don't come and talk to me because I'm so busy. But it means, like, there's a time and a place for certain things. And it's okay that he knows, like, where are you going, Dad? And Dad says, I'm going to jiu-jitsu. I'm going to the gym. That's an important thing for him to know. It's okay for me not to be with him 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. This is how they gain a sense of independence and a sense of identity, and they can grow to be functioning adults without people surrounding them all the time. So I would say, I would actually start with this particular client, I would say, well, what is it about putting someone else's needs in front of your own that seems to be satisfying to you? Because it seems temporary, and it doesn't seem to be lasting. Like, you're either rescuing or you're saving people or you're being the hero to everyone else, but you're neglecting yourself in this process. And in the end, you're feeling more empty. You're not feeling complete. You're not happy with who you are. So what you're doing is creating these conflicts. But why you're allowing the conflicts to exist, or at least the way you're justifying them, is by saying I should be this expectation of perfection. That I shouldn't care about my needs anymore because now I have other people's needs to consider.
Yeah, you always do. Like, everybody always has other people's needs in their lives. Obviously, having a kid is very important, and especially we don't know how young her kids are. You know, like when it's a newborn, clearly they're a little more attached to you than when they're older. But you always have other people's needs that you have to be dealing with. And you always, like you said, the ripple effect of everything. So if you take care of yourself or you don't take care of yourself, that's going to have a ripple effect either way. And it's not about being selfish and saying, well, you know what, I listen to this podcast and I'm going to go back to the gym every day and you guys can just handle it and the house can be a mess and I'm never cooking dinner again. Like, that's not the right approach either.
Right.
It's about saying, okay, what for the minimum, like what's the minimum that I can do right now to move forward? Maybe not be like the absolute 100% best, but be my best for right now and then adjust it. And I think that talking about those roles too, within like the relationship dynamic is so important. And I think that a lot of people, especially when you first get into a relationship, like nobody's like first date, like, hey, so are you gonna wash the dishes or is that me? Like, how are we gonna do, like nobody's doing that, right?
Check.
Yeah, you're like, getting out of here. You're like, this was just Tinder, bro. Anyways, so, or whatever kids do, I don't know. What are these kids using now? Tinder? Hinge? Literally, I've never, dating apps are like a whole different world. I
don't think people use them anymore. Everybody I talk to now, they say like,
you're old.
It doesn't matter. For people, young people that I talk to, I'm 41 by the way, I'm not that old. The youngsters in the world, they just tell me that like,
are they too cool
somebody likes their picture and then they send an emoji and then they like start talk. That's how they say they connect now. So Instagram is just as much a dating app as Tinder, apparently.
Right. Well, anyways, so nobody's going to do that in the beginning of a relationship.
Right.
And, you know, when you have just started, you know, dating is going to be very different than obviously like when you have a kid with somebody. So just being able to revisit those kinds of things, I think, is really important. And, you know, that's not a comfortable conversation to have, and it's not like a fun one to have. And for a while you can do what this chick is doing, which is just like, yeah, I got it, I can do it, I'll handle it. But in reality, how much easier would it be if like two things were taken off your plate?
Right.
That you would either be able to like, hey, like your husband would be willing to do it if you just asked him, right? Or family, or, you know, hey, I just really can't clean the house right now. Maybe you hire a house cleaner for this time being, right? Like maybe that's not ideal forever, but like for a certain time to get you through your period. So there's always a solution. And it's just about kind of working through that and saying, okay, what is the minimum that I need to do, and what do I have to give up in order to actually do that?
Right. And so one of the things that I would encourage somebody in this situation, in particular this person, is I would say, look, what I want you to do is, number one, let's take a look at your day, okay? And let's see if there's some things that we can cut out, right? If we're looking at a list of priorities and picking the kid up from school is a priority, making dinner is a priority, going to the gym is a priority, and doing a few other things are priorities. Well, what else is on this list that's not a priority that we can get rid of? It becomes a pretty simple swap then, doesn't it? It's a pretty easy decision to make. But let's say we don't even want to take that approach, which by the way is a very effective approach. Like we can oftentimes look at our life and realize where we're spending a lot of time and where we're wasting a lot of time. And if we can cut out the waste, it allows time for us to be more productive in the things that actually matter to us. But the second thing I would say to her is I'd say, okay, well, how do we incorporate your family into this solution, right? Not only does it mean talking to your husband about, hey, I'm feeling overwhelmed or stressed, or I need you, you know, or whatever, but how do we get the kids involved with that? How do we get the kids to buy into the idea that, hey, mommy needs her gym time, and going to the gym is fun for mommy and is good for mommy? I want anybody's kids who I'm working with to grow up and have their own set of priorities, their own set of values, things that make them them. Well, how do they get that? Where do they get that? Do they get that by seeing mom sacrifice everything to be there for them, which is something they won't recognize until they're in their mid-20s anyway, right? No. They see that, those things get instilled in them, that sense of independence and priority and value get put in place early on. So let the kids be a part of it, let the husband be a part of it, let's everybody create a solution for these things. Well, why isn't mom here? Because mommy's at the gym, and that's important, and we all know that, right? You know, little Susie or little Bobby or whatever the names are. And so it becomes this part of it, and it goes vice versa. However you want to structure that, but allow the family to become a part of that. And then the other part would be I'd start to explore the parts of you that are struggling with setting these boundaries right now, because sometimes what happens is it's very easy to focus on other people, because in doing so it allows us not to focus on ourselves. Even when we know, yeah, look, I get all the benefits when I do it, but I'm not doing it. So there's this part of me that it's easier to be in everybody else's life than it is to actually work on my own, to face my own insecurities, or to fix some of the issues that I have going on, or to think differently, or to believe differently about myself. And I think sometimes that can be a challenge when we start looking at it within I don't know really who I am right now, and I'm trying to figure that out. So if I don't know who I am, how do I prioritize what's important to me when I've lost my sense of confidence? And what I see for a lot of women who are just getting past that pregnancy phase and they're raising kids is sometimes they anchor themselves to other people's expectations, right? And so what ends up happening is and maybe this is something she's struggling with, I don't know, having not really actually sat down and spoken to her, but she's externalizing the sense of happiness, right? She's placing it on other people. If everybody else is around me, then they're happy, and that must mean I'm doing good, which means I'm worthwhile, and I'm a good parent, and I'm a good mom, and I'm a good person, right? We see how this always filters back down to a core belief. And so rather, when we do that, when our confidence is tied to other people or the happiness of other people around us, we lose the sense of direction within ourselves. We no longer are asking ourselves, is this making me happy? Is this what I'm supposed to be doing? So in not focusing on other people all the time, it forces us to hear our own voice a little bit more. It forces you to pay attention to what you're thinking, what you're feeling, and that becomes the priority. That's what becomes important. And again, it's not about completely abandoning everybody else. It's about incorporating this part with it. And so that's an important part. And Some of the other things I would say to her is like, look, let's define your goals, like, and define who you want to be. And okay, so you want to be a great mother. Awesome. There's too few great mothers in the world, so I'm excited that you want to be in that category. Let's help you get there. But in being a good mom, it doesn't mean you have to be a bad person to yourself. And it doesn't mean that you don't come first. It actually means the opposite, because we want your kids to see that you're important. We want them to see these values, and we want to know that mom is there. And you don't have to be their new parents every minute of every day in order to be a valuable asset to your kids, to be important to them. And so define who you want to be now, and define who you want to be later, and create plans to help you achieve that. Look at your schedule. What can be cut out? What can be added? What can be taken away from it? And incorporate your family. Get them involved with it. Like, this doesn't have to be your own struggle.
Yeah, I think that's really good. Obviously, especially as like the kids get older too. Like, you don't just have to be like, oh, I'll do everything for you. Like, hey, like, not like a newborn, but like, you can do your laundry. Like, you can take the dishes away. Like, you can do these things. Like, you can make your lunch. And it's not just about like, oh, I gotta make your lunch again. It's like, no, like, why don't you teach them to make it themselves, and then they can do it. And now that's still gonna be like a lot of time and effort on your part. It's not that it's like you're shirking the responsibility, but now you're empowering the kid to actually be able to do something. And again, we don't know how old, if this is like a newborn, or if this is like whatever the situation is, how old they are, but that's clearly going to be like age dependent. But getting your significant other or your family, or again, there's gonna be certain situations like, hey, I don't have time to go to the grocery store, so we're having drive-in or whatever, drive-through. So it shows how much I go fast food restaurants. You can get your groceries delivered. You can literally order meal prepped food. Like, it's not an excuse. Now, I'm not saying that you have time to make like these extravagant meals, but there are ways to make it easier instead of saying, I'm not going to do anything at all, or I need to be this like perfect person. It always goes back to like that like black and white thinking. That is what goes into all of these themes, especially with our clients. Like, we just see that so much, but you don't have to do nothing, but you don't have to make like this like 10 course gourmet dinner either. Like, there are ways to make this easier on yourself. Like, get your groceries delivered, have certain things that are prepped, like hire a house cleaner. Like, there are going to be certain things that it's like, find a daycare or a babysitter that like, meshes really well with your kids. So you can say, hey, I'm going to be gone for 2 hours a week. Like, it's just about finding the right thing and saying, okay, like, what can I take away? Like, what's excess here? And then what are a few like key things that I can adjust so that I'm, making myself a priority without just completely ignoring all my responsibilities. And the biggest thing I would just say too, and this is so hard, and I would say this with like, take what I say with a grain of salt. I don't have kids, everybody knows that, but over time, I see how easy this is to fall into like, I don't need to take care of myself, I need to just take care of others. And that partly is just like that innate motherly response. But when you don't take care of yourself and you are not a healthy version of yourself, whether that's like metabolically, hormonally, mentally, whatever it is, like physically, you are not going to be as good of a parent as you could be. So doesn't mean that you need to like train for Ironman to like get on a bodybuilding stage, but you can certainly take care of your physical self so that you have the energy to be a great parent, and that you are healthy for your kids, and so you're not worried about that aspect too. Correct.
Yeah. So I hope that this was helpful for this particular person who's struggling with this, or for anybody who you guys know. And again, for this particular client, it's not just, it doesn't seem like it's just the home life that's out of whack a little bit. It seems like she's really struggling with setting up those good boundaries with her colleagues and places at work. So we did a podcast on boundaries, maybe going back through and kind of focusing on, all right, am I allowing myself to become too involved with other people's goals and expectations and not focusing on mine enough in these areas? How do I ask for help in those spaces and set better boundaries to say, look, no, this is something I can't do versus something I can do, or that I want to do. And if it doesn't align with who you want to be, which again starts with kind of defining who you are and where you want to go and what you want to do, creating that sense of identity. But you'll never be happy if your happiness is based off of the people around you. As happy as they may be and as content as they may be, your happiness can't be and isn't contingent upon another person, because then that means as soon as they're unhappy, so are you. And then that's just, it creates too much emotional instability. So what we don't want to do is externalize our happiness on everybody else. We want to start channeling that back inward. And that'll breed a stronger sense of confidence in what you're doing. And as you maneuver your way through this with the help of your husband, who I'm sure is a loving, adoring man who's if he's already picking up the kids or asking to do those things, like, let's incorporate him, because dad's just as important as mom. So I hope this helps. And if there's ever anybody who we do answer your questions and we don't get to some specific part of it, if you ever want to ask follow-ups, I guess that would be appropriate too.
Yeah, for sure. Like the ones that we've answered, you could definitely send a follow-up to the same Google Drive link form, Google form. I'm really not on it right now. If you have any other questions or you want to ask a question like this that you would want me and Rick to go over, I will link that Google form below. If you want to ask a follow-up question to one that we've already covered, you can send that there as well. I'll also put his email in the show notes for you guys who are interested in working with Rick. And for everything else, you can visit teamlocofit.com. So thank you guys, as always, for tuning in, and we'll talk to you next week.